So the next bit, I suppose, is a chance to say your bit. There've been reports, and I've actually spotted someone personally a couple of days ago that this has actually happened to, of people having booked appointments to get a test done. Whether or not whether they've been in contact with someone who's tested positive, or just they've got a bit of cash and they thought, I really want an appointment. I want a test done, and for whatever reason they haven't actually attended the test on that day. For whatever reason they couldn't go or whatever. But they've registered online, or they've registered somewhere for the test with their details, which is their contact information, address, telephone number, and obviously name. And they've not actually turned up for the test, but they've got received letters in the post, or a text message on their phone, giving their result, which is very strange. So, and these, I've spoken to someone who they got a negative result. And I've heard on social media that some people actually got positive results, and when they've sort of contacted the test centre, there's been like a misunderstanding, and they've been asked to come in, and there's been some sort of mistake. What would be your opinion on that, Dave? And what's your thoughts? And what would you say to someone who sort of has their belief? And after hearing something like this, sort of change their belief. What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, it seems to be. I can see why you came to me first, having had to cancel an appointment. But it's all about these statistics, isn't it? How they're manipulating the statistics. It's no longer about deaths. It's about cases, and cases are spiralling because of the efficiency of the track and trace, or lack of efficiency of it. The tests are going on. There's something like 250,000 tests a day in the UK, which per capita is the highest in the world. There is nobody gets even close to the UK, with a population of more than 10 million, that has so many tests done. Now, whether, again, these are statistics. We don't know. Are these people being same people tested twice or 3 times, or is it there just to make it look good, or is it exploding figure? We don't know. But it's obviously affecting people who need to go to hospitals for appointments. I flew over from Argentina because I had a scan booked in the UK, and it says quite clearly there, if you are going for a pre-arranged check, you don't need to quarantine.
Yeah.
And I came to Ibiza because it gave me 10 days before I went to the UK to be in a relatively COVID-free environment. And just to double check, I went for a test on the Friday before I was due to fly out on the Tuesday, thinking 4 or 5 days is the incubation period. Yeah. And I went, and I didn't actually get a reply from the test. I assume I'm negative because nobody's contacted me.
And did you pay for that as well?
No. It was they phoned me up as soon as I landed. I think they were scared that I came from Argentina and saw the figures there. But so these statistics, these figures they're putting out, as we know, statistics can always be damn lies, and they can be manipulated to whichever way suits their agenda.
And to have that leaked, it sort of gives people even more of an opinion to believe that what you're saying is true as well. Mistakes like that. You're saying,
if you're saying people are becoming more skeptical of COVID because it's not suiting their lifestyle or their agenda or whatever, then yes, I can only agree that people are becoming more skeptical because it's becoming more tolerant and we can live with it.
Yeah. 3 seconds to spare as well, mate.
Timing, eh?
There you go.
I think I've got a couple of points.
Cool. Ian, if you want to answer that question.
So, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of it's quite clear that whatever statistics we are getting is coming from various different sources. So it's all about database management, essentially, and this is unprecedented what's happening at the moment.
But none of them, there's no uniformity.
Well, I'm not defending anything right now. I'm just saying that this is what's happening at the moment in terms of what positive cases are and what negative cases are. For example, what you're saying about a text message getting through when they didn't even go for a test.
Yeah.
It's clear there's an error or a bug in the database.
Yeah.
Right. So this is happening. It's about whether the people that manage those databases are eradicating those errors and then deleting those false positives or those false negatives, as they might be. We don't know. They might be doing that.
Oh, it could just be a random computer error.
Well, it can be.
Could
Yeah, I
just
mean,
be that, but it's
databases are
happening
complicated, but also with in terms of gathering all this data from lots of different places. One of the main stories of this whole thing, I think, has been about ineptitude and lack of preparation.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. There were so many warnings in the past about the fact there could be a pandemic coming, and no one was really properly prepared for it. Because if you look at, you were talking about countries which have effectively dealt with it, and people are now living in freedom. If you look at New Zealand, you can actually walk around. It's COVID-free. Now, yeah, they had a very strong lockdown, very small population, etc. They had certain things going for them. But imagine living in a world
stopped people coming in. Essentially,
yes,
stopped,
of course. Yeah,
isolated the
Ibiza
country.
was terrible. I mean, that was an awful decision. But so the statistics that are coming up, I'm as skeptical as anyone. I'm not defending them. I'm just saying that there are mechanical processes that happen in terms of before those statistics get published, and there are errors. You only hope that the ones that get published have had the errors eradicated as much as possible. Now, whether or not, you've got to look at the actual error margin. You know, what amount of bad, positives are you going to get? Yeah. If it's negligible, then we've still got a problem. Yeah. It's only if there's half of the things that are wrong that we're actually thinking, hang on a minute, certain errors happen. Errors happen in diagnostics all the time.
If you take the statistics on deaths to cases or death to population, deaths are being recorded in different countries in different ways all around. Some people, if you were going to the test centre and you get hit by a bus, you died of COVID because that's what you were doing.
Anecdotal evidence,
and other places like Brazil and that are trying to suppress the figures. So they're just burying people without even testing them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I could comment on that as well, but I didn't get my time.
There's no uniformity.
I'll give you an extra 30 seconds on that. Go for it. Go for it.
Well, I mean, as I'm not arguing with you about that. I know for a fact that was happening, and in general, what I think was happening is that certainly in third world countries or second world countries, there was a certain amount of funding that was being put aside for hospitals that were able to prove that they had COVID deaths, so that they could justify more funding. So therefore, if they could identify someone who died, they might have been in their 60s, they might have had terrible illness anyway, but they were COVID positive, they can add that to the death certificate, and then that would eventually lead to more funding for them. That's not right, but then is funding for hospitals wrong? I mean, I don't know which side of the argument I stand on that, but I think it's been warped a little bit in terms of people's really distaste to the fact that that would even happen in the first place. I don't necessarily think it was always done for the wrong reasons.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. I'm going to ask Peacharoo the same question, but if everyone can give everyone their 3 minutes, that would be great. And then at the end, if you do want to write some notes down, at the end, you can have a full-on discussion with no hold barred, should I say. Right, Peacharoo, so we've got some good points there. So these people are getting tests, they're not turning up for them, but they're getting the results. Like, explain that.
Yeah, it's crazy. During the lockdown, there was a president of one of the African countries that sent in samples of a papaya and other different animate and inanimate objects with samples that they could send in, and they all came back positive. So papaya, a fruit, is carrying COVID. So this makes us.
Where's this?
I think it was Namibia. I can't remember the exact location of the country, but it's online. This president of this particular country, I think it was Ghana, Namibia to Ghana, something like that, came out and has done press conferences about it, telling them that he personally sent samples of fruits and animals to the testing labs and they came back positive. Now he thinks this is laughable. For anybody else with a subjectively questioned mind, it should make you wonder why. And then we look at the false positives that we've been talking about here, the elevated numbers, and we have to ask ourselves, are we really going to continue to listen to all this confusion when all it's doing is separating us? Don't forget, I want to go back to harmony and the harmony state of nature. This is division, and whichever way you look at it, the government are trying to divide us and separate us from who we are as human beings, as a community on this planet, and separate us from our soul as well, right? separating us from our being, not allowing us to understand who we are and what we're here to do. We spend our lives working for the man till we retire, and then we can have 20 years of freedom. What's this? This is not life. And this type of information and control regimes that we're given is very, very intrinsically linked to the information that we're getting about these false positive test results. I want to go on to the testing as well. We're using PCR tests. The creator of the PCR test, this is a long stick which you stick up in the back of your nose. It's been designed to take swabs from the thinnest membrane in between our nose and our brain on an airborne virus. So this is an airborne virus which is anywhere. Why are we putting shit all the way to the back of our nose, causing grief and real stressful situations? We've got to start asking ourselves these questions, because this is imposing fear on us. But not only that, the PCR tests for something called, hang on, the PCR tests, of which the creator was strangely killed a couple of years before it came out, actually test for, it's called exozymes. So an exozyme is something which a cell naturally gives off. We don't exactly know what an exozyme is, because this information has only started to be revealed since a study in 2015. Okay. Some people think it's the way that the cells communicate to one another. So these are microscopic nanoparticles which cells release normally to potentially communicate with the cells, or it could be waste. Now, when the PCR test picks this up, they have to amplify this tiny nanoparticle more than 40 times to try and get a reading, which then they decide whether it's positive or negative. Right. The law states, if we're going into a legal law, anything that needs amplifying more than 30 times is not going to cause you to die. Right. It's not going to cause this infection inside you that we're also worried about. So then we start asking ourselves about the lockdown. What the fuck are we doing? This has got a 99% survival rate. The CDC last week released information that we're now looking at. The CDC, who we've been following for all this, and the WHO yesterday came out and said that lockdowns aren't efficient or effective at controlling the virus, as Dave has mentioned in his examples. Thanks very much for that, Peacharoo. So what you're saying is that the tests themselves are flawed anyway, whether they're positive or negative. 100%. This is my belief system, and like I say, if you go back to the fact that if this virus is airborne, and it lands on stuff and we can touch it 10 minutes afterwards and still pick it up, then we have to consider this and use our common sense. We can spit and we can give a test. Don't let anyone put any shit in the back of your nose. Just on a last note, and I think Ian's going to comment on that. Have you, just yes or no, have you had any form of test this year for COVID-19? No. Right. Ian? Okay, so what I wanted to mention really is about these tests. And I've got one personal kind of story, which I think will support what I'm saying, and another which is just a general thing. They exist to try and identify these things in the nasal passage, right? And they're not 100% accurate. However, it's the quickest and the most effective way to potentially identify the virus in someone's nasal passage. Now, my father had a heart attack in August, and he's an ex-GP, and he's used this test a lot. He said he was in recovery for a couple of days after the heart attack, and he watched lines of people getting their test done poorly, not accurately by a doctor. These are basically volunteers that were brought in to help deal with the amount of people that needed to be tested, and the tests were not being done properly. So you're going to get false positives. So he's lying there in his bed thinking, well, you know what's going to happen here. So as much as what you've said, there is scientific truths in it, when you apply it to the context of multiple people wanting to get tested, the paranoia of people saying, I need to travel or this, that, and the other, you're going to end up with error margins. Because it's humans that are doing these tests anyway. It's not as if it's like a computer that you can program and does exactly the same thing every time, which would be the best way in an ideal world, but you're never ever going to get that. And like you say, with the amount of people that are coming in, and also, sorry Dave, just for last thing, also I completely agree that once these statistics are starting to be used and manipulated by governments, that's where I completely agree with you, is that the problem we've got is that we're sitting ducks, that there is no way of us being able to say, well, hang on a minute, some of these are false positives. They're saying, well, no, we need to err on the side of caution and use those false positives to potentially protect the 60 to 80-year-olds that will potentially die if they catch this virus.
Yeah, they seem to be picking up dead virus, and it's not an accurate test. There should be a new 15-second test coming out. I always think it's better with blood anyhow and properly analyse it. But Peachy's brought up a very good point. Yes, society's been driven apart. If it wasn't over Brexit, then it's over this. And there's always got to be something where we're divided down the middle. Trump or Biden, COVID or non-COVID, whatever.
This is what they want us to think. This is what they want us to think. We don't have to be divided. We are united. We've got solidarity. We're human beings of planet Earth. We're the 99%. We're far more powerful than the 1%. It's that simple. If you learn your rights and you get up to date with your human rights and the common law, then we don't have to subject ourselves to any of this. And this stands up with officers of the law that are trying to impose it.
It's crazy when you think about it that when they signed Magna Carta, they said that in innocence of the law is no defence, and yet we have a system where you could fill the biggest building up in the world with all the different laws. It takes judges, solicitors, and all these very highly trained people to interpret what the law is and then apply it to you. So how you, Joe Boggs, going to sorry, I said innocence, I meant ignorance of the law. Ignorance of the law is we're all ignorant of the law because the laws are forever changing.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Let's move on to we're going to get a time at the end to sort of have like a proper talk amongst ourselves. We're going to move on to the next question. I'm going to ask this one I'm going to ask Peacharoo to answer this first, if that's all right.
On the spot, mate.
Right, so some people are following rules and regulations because they don't want fines. Let us finish the question, because I know you're dying to get into there. Following the rules and regulations because they don't want to be fined or they don't want to upset anyone. So in some cases, these people simply don't want to take the risk on the off chance that this is all legitimate and it's all real. So they're just following. They've always followed rules and regulations. They don't have access to all of this information that you're putting across, and I totally agree that on some points that you've mentioned, and the fact that you research a lot of stuff. I'm the same. I do research a lot of stuff, and I try and take both sides of the story. Some people simply don't do that, right? So my question is, what's your thoughts on someone following the rules and regulations because they simply don't want to be fined, and what would you say to those people?
These people, by some of the they call us right wing because we have such extreme views, but like I keep saying, it's all about unity. This for me. People that follow the rules in fear of getting fined are as bad as the people that create the rules. You're enabling the state to do what they want to do. It's that simple. Until you start to disrespect that and respect your own person, your own being as a human, that is not going to pass on an infection. It's not going to pass on a virus because you look after your body and you understand how to treat yourself, then there's no reason to succumb to anyone's laws. When there's a lot happening in the background with common law at the moment, and common law is going to free us all. So this is happening and this is inevitable. There's going to be a huge change in government state stature, and we're all going to be able to be free and to live our lives how we want to live it. There's going to be people are able to commute to build things together is what we're looking for, what we're going to be bringing into as a new community. So the type of governmental control that we need in the future is going to be so much different to what we've got at the moment. So to the people that wear masks, and I know a lot of them, and I wear a mask if I need to go into a shop. I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face if I need some supplies. If a shop I want to shop in wants me to wear a mask, I'll have to put a mask on to go in there.
Is that because you won't be able to go in there?
This is my choice. Yeah, no, the security guards in the shops and the till staff of the shops enforce wearing a mask to enter, and these are private companies, so you have to do as they say. Otherwise, they just don't serve you, don't get what you want, so it's pointless. However, the fact is that these masks, everyone's walking around with pieces of cloth. You know, the masks are of such different quality, and we know that the virus that's created is actually something like 40 times smaller than the holes in the mask. So in effect, they're worthless. We can catch viruses through our ears. They're completely pointless. And the rules that you've got to sit down at a table. One of the bars asked me to put a mask on as I walked through the door recently. So I was on the promenade in San Antonio walking down with no mask on, went to go in this bar. This girl in the front tried to make me put a mask on to walk through the door before I sat down and took it off again. Who was that?
So I suppose, like, going back to the original question, if I sort of reword it a little bit, if there was someone sort of in the room that you were in that sort of would be offended or upset that you wouldn't wear a mask because, I don't know, for example, they might have a condition, or they're frightened. Do you know what I mean? They're frightened that they're going to get something off you. Yeah. What would you say to that person?
Well, if this person's wearing a mask, then they're protected, right? So what does it matter what I do? If the mask is going to protect you from catching the flu, then carry on wearing your mask. I'll stay 2 meters away from you, no probs. But I'll continue to do what I want to do. Yeah. I've not had the flu or a cold for many years. I eat a plant-based diet. It's pretty much all organic. My body's my temple. I'm not going to get the flu. I'm not going to get a cold. I'm certainly not going to die from it, and I'm certainly not going to pass it on. So I know my body. I know who I am.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you want to be in a room with me and you want to freak out about me passing a non-contagious virus, then this is for you to deal with.
So the answer to your question is just to tell those people to sort of stand up for their own rights. It's their sort of responsibility to stand up for themselves.
It's our responsibility as human beings to know what our human rights are, and I am actually quite saddened that it took me 42 years to find out what they were this week, and this should be something which is taught in schools. This is something that we should be growing up with, and we should know so we can have the power to be ourselves from birth.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Peacharoo. Does anyone want to touch on any of that?
It's this balance thing again, isn't it? I could regard, having had an operation for cancer last year, I could regard myself as vulnerable. So if I'm vulnerable, then in the UK, I think they would call it shielding. And at the end of the day, I'm in charge of my own destiny. I'm not reliant on others to deal with my destiny. So it's up to me to protect myself at the end of the day. But where they have, there's a lot of the conflicts. People will go, oh yeah, I can't have my sister in my house, but I can go down the pub or whatever. Yeah, it's all these different conflicts that make it all nonsensical. As you said, putting a mask on just to walk to yeah. Some people are a little over anal about it. A lot of people are a little more relaxed. But I think you just have to use common sense and, like the Japanese wearing them all the time, it's consideration for others. So whether it's a law or not, it should be consideration for others. And I can understand if you put a law on it, then there's going to be rebelliousness against that law. But if we're talking about what we know, that the mask doesn't protect us from getting the virus, but it's certainly, if I'm suddenly going to cough or sneeze, then I'm going to whack my mask up to protect others. And it's simple consideration.
Well, I mean, I was just going to back that up, really. I mean, the mask thing was initially considered as nonsense, certainly by the UK, by the Conservative government of the UK, until the scientific evidence showed that if two people are wearing masks, there's a much smaller chance.
It was inconclusive to begin with as to whether it was detrimental because of mould and breathing in.
Despite the fact that SARS was massively controlled. But
it's up to you to wash your mask as well if you don't want to breathe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And then you've got touch keypads and people touching things. I mean, it's a minefield in terms of trying to accurately do it. One thing I would say is that, ironically, by not wearing a mask for the purposes of saying, well, I'm asthmatic, I've got a form, I don't need to wear a mask. Well, the most vulnerable people are people who are asthmatic, and they're the people that should be wearing masks. So it's a bit ironic to not have to wear a mask because you're asthmatic to be able to breathe, when if you contract the virus and you're asthmatic, you're in real trouble. So there are lots of these unfortunate dilemmas that are being created by legislation. And I think sometimes we focus too specifically on cases. And one thing that, with 10 seconds left to go, I don't think we've focused on enough, is the concept of poverty. We're talking about Western civilizations, very, very fortunate people who have health and diet to a certain level where we can fight this virus off. And it's all very well and good talking about how someone else in the room, well, it's up to them how they conduct themselves. Well, what about countries where the quality of life and the diet and everything is so poor that they are really at risk? And it feels a little bit pompous to me to be talking about these things. Well, if we pass it on to someone else and then that person pass it on to someone in the third world, we could create a lot more death. And that is a risk I wouldn't like on my conscience. Basically.
I would like to just add one thing. The governments don't seem to have done what I would have seen as very sensible reductions of virulence. Like, for example, on a bus, why haven't buses and trains all be fitted with UV lighting?
So, that's you're going to answer the final one of the final questions.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
You've seen the notes, Dave, haven't you?
So, one of the questions there. But if Peacharoo, if you want to continue, I can give you another 3 minutes.
No. I just wanted to say that there is no right and there's no wrong in the way they can deal with this. Everything that Dave and Ian have both said, there's got a lot of truth to it, myself included. If we look after the society, the vulnerable people in society. The vulnerable people in society for this are people that have got more than 2 pre-existing conditions. These are the people that are more likely to die, and they're over 65 years old across the entire world. So let's look after the people that are might likely to suffer from it, instead of making us, everyone, do the same thing. This herd immunisation, which is where we're leading to, there's absolutely no evidence at all to support that this is going to work. This is all pie in the sky shit. So let's look after the people that are the most vulnerable. Let's look after our OAPs. Let's get them tested.